right, well, thank you for finding your seats. Welcome, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephen Davidonim. I'm the editor-in-chief of Culture Map Houston. I've had the privilege of covering this luncheon and the many notable names that it has featured and showcased over the years. Also very personally connected to Menninger, so it's an honor and a privilege to be here with you today. At this time, I hope you will help me welcome Reverend Salvador Del Mundo. He is Menninger's chaplain, and he will lead us in a brief invocation.
I invite you to join me in the spirit of prayer and meditation. Spirit of life and love, healer of minds and hearts, you make your presence known to us in different ways and through different experiences. Today, may we experience your presence in fresh ways as we come together to build bridges of understanding and cooperation. May you grant wisdom as we make choices so that we can come out of the side of community with compassion, not isolation and chaos. May we find new connections that translate into deeds of justice and compassion. May we strive also to keep hope alive along with possibility, knowing that hope is always an option, even in the face of our darkest despair. May we remember that there is always the possibility of possibilities beyond our current imagining, even as we find ourselves navigating through those uncomfortable liminal spaces. Into our hands is now given to shape the future of the Menninger Clinic, to chart as best as we may a course of honor and excellence amid the chance and challenges of the world we serve. And even as we get ready to open our doors to new programs and services, give us the spirit of wisdom and courage so that we may achieve our mission, our goals with distinction. Help us choose the best path and help head towards the best marker. Continue to instill in our hearts and minds the values of excellence, teamwork, hope, integrity, and caring. Remind us that these are not simply words we chose to make us look good. Rather, these are the ideals we seek to embody as they reflect our resolve and commitment to do good. Help us realize a vision for a better future, one that will help take us to the next level. So here is our chance once again, as part of a wider and empowering community, to live like we wish the world would live, to reach our potential to engage in efforts for social justice for which so many of us yearn. And even as we live in an imperfect world, remind us once more that the primary act of faith in the goodness of life is engaging in the kind of restorative work that heals, binds, and makes whole what is fractured and broken. Enable us to find ways to be inclusive of persons living with mental illness in our everyday lives. We lift up those who see in the darkness of disease a glimmer of hope for the common good. We lift up all those in the helping professions as we seek to overcome ignorance and injustice with care and compassion. Help us remember the hope we had, build on the hope we have, and look forward to the hope we will have. Help us remember joy amid sadness and fear, success in the midst of these challenges, and good things in the midst of bad. Help us to be better people, to work for better things, to create a better world. For the blessings which we are about to partake, in the company of friends, peers, and colleagues, may we truly be grateful. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend. That was beautiful. That was lovely. Ladies and gentlemen, you are a lovely and attractive crowd. And speaking of lovely and attractive, take a look at your centerpieces. These gorgeous flowers are graciously provided by Texas's favorite grocery store, our own H-E-B. So the folks at Menninger and H-E-B have a little game for you. Everybody poll each other at your table. Whoever has the next birthday, that means the birthday coming up next, gets this floral arrangement. And be honest, no cheating. So figure that out. Please enjoy your lunch. There'll be a very great slideshow, and we'll begin in about 10 minutes.
Good afternoon. I first want to welcome everybody to the 2023 Menninger Clinic Signature Luncheon. We are thrilled that you are all here with us today. So I want to thank everybody who's here in person, but also all those who have joined us virtually, because that's what we do now, right? All proceeds from today's luncheon will go to support our new Center for Addiction Medicine and Recovery. In a few minutes, I'll introduce Dr. Daryl Shorter, who will share more about our vision to create new pathways towards recovery for people living with addiction. We're really excited about this project. In your programs, you'll find a donation card. If you haven't already donated, please consider making a donation to the clinic. Before we kick things off, there's some important people I need to thank. First, a special thanks to our host committee members and luncheon chairs, Poppy Massey and Susie Peak, who have done an amazing job filling this room. Several of my board members are here with us today, including our clinic and foundation board chairs, Ronnie Cunod and Jeff Payne. Thank you for all your support. And of course, this event is not possible without our generous sponsors and donors who have helped make today a success and continue to support the Menninger Clinic. So special thanks to our first ever inspiring mind sponsor, the Cunod families, in memory of Grace and Monroe Cunod. Our future and mind sponsor, Carol and Jim Look and Walter Oil and Gas. Our leading mind sponsors, the Stanford and Joan Alexander Foundation and Shirley Tuman, Letty Knapp and Vivi and Chris O'Sullivan, Katina Ponticus and Monty McDaniel, Ann Tramo and Linda Underwood. Thank you all. Mental health is crucial to our community, especially in times of crisis and change like we've seen over the last few years, which has just been a whirlwind for all of us. A healthy mind helps us to be more resilient, to manage our disappointments, and to face life's inevitable challenges in constructive ways. A healthy mind also helps us to empathize with others and build positive relationships. Finally, a healthy mind ensures we are capable of meeting our full potential and giving back to our communities. I'm extremely proud of the work we've done at the Menninger Clinic during this past year to continue to expand our services and restore healthy minds to thousands of adults, adolescents, and families. So just a few highlights. Last fall, with the support of many people who are in this room, we opened our new outpatient building, which houses an unbelievably unique sleep lab that specializes in psychological and behavioral health. Our new brain stimulation center run by Neil Puri that offers life-saving, state-of-the-art treatment, especially for those with persistent depression and other disorders. And then our spacious outpatient wing, which our talented clinicians and therapists diagnose and treat many, many disorders. Later this year, the second floor will be built and will become the home of our new Center for Addiction Medicine and Recovery to help meet the growing need of addiction in our community. And as many of you know, our youngsters are suffering with unprecedented mental health challenges. In February, I was thrilled and honored to partner with Texas Children's Hospital and Baylor College of Medicine to create a program that will expand access to inpatient care for teens in crisis. Since the pandemic started, Texas Children's has seen an 800% increase in adolescents with mental health issues. And where they end up? In their emergency room. These teens can now be transferred to a special 12-bed unit at the Menninger Clinic, supervised by Baylor College of Medicine and Texas Children's Child and Adolescent Psychiatrists. And probably the most exciting thing for the Menninger Clinic is that unit will accept insurance. So I credit Aetna for being the first, but we are in negotiations with 3 other major insurance companies. And for all of those you know, the Menninger Clinic has not accepted insurance since we moved to Houston. So this is a huge access point for people in our community who need our help and haven't had access to the wonderful care at the Menninger Clinic. So I'm very proud of that. In addition, end of this month, we'll be opening a residential program on campus for those patients who need less restrictive care. We are creating pathways for them that will allow them to transition back to their everyday lives. So again, expanding the continuum and opening greater access for our patients in the community. Speaking of community, as we strive to meet our patients where they are in their mental health journey, it is important at the clinic that we also are out and about in the community. We've dedicated resource to building collaborative programs in the community, specifically focused on adolescents and families. We are expanding our work with local schools and exploring new opportunities to collaborate with organizations like the YMCA, where we will be providing support for all of their day camps this summer, which those kids really need it. They're more apt to talk to their counselor than their parents, and so we're going to be there to help with those issues this summer. In partnership with our academic affiliate, Baylor College of Medicine, our clinical trainees are providing mental health services to those underserved at federally qualified health centers here in Houston, which is, again, wonderful, especially in the addiction space. And our community clubhouse, the gathering place where local residents with persistent and permanent mental illness have come together. It's reopened, it's brand new. We've reopened after COVID, and it's an amazing place. And finally, I'd like to highlight a relationship that we built recently with the NFL Trust. The Trust, powered by the NFL Players Association, provides an amazing array of services to 27,000 former NFL players that are eligible for their services. Anything from vocational services, job training, financial counseling, and now the Menninger Clinic. And so I'd like to recognize a couple of very special people, Cheryl Turner and Diane Eunice, who have joined us here from the Trust today. It's been an amazing journey, and I'm proud and honored to partner with the Trust, and I hope that we can have this be an example for other leagues around the country on how we take care of these very special people. And I'd like to, before I introduce Daryl, I'd like to read a portion of a letter from a recent patient. I've survived racism since I was a 5-year-old child, and now as a grown man. I've survived car crashes. I've had guns to my face. I've watched people die. I've discovered dead bodies. I've broken bones, dislocated kneecaps. I've played through concussions. I've wrecked a motorcycle. I've had ex-girlfriends die. Despite all these things, I don't know that I ever felt like the end was near. It's just the way it is and the way it was. I came here broken. I came here because I felt the end was near, and the end was near. A prediction of the future is not readily available, but it is available today and right now. You all have made the most difficult time of my life one of the most memorable times of my life. The day-to-day kindness and compassion, respect and dignity, the simplest things every day. A hello, how are you doing, is what I experienced every day, whether you were a doctor, a nurse, a custodian, or a chef. Every bit of it mattered. While I am very quiet to a fault, I observe everything with curiosity. I cannot thank you all enough for my time here. The only reason this place survives and thrives is because of all of you, the people on the ground, the people that do the real work every day. Your tasks are not easy. I know this, understand this, and respect this. To say thank you is not enough, but as I leave here today, I am forever grateful for the special treatment you all have given me. I encourage you to stay encouraged. Your daily actions do not go unnoticed. It may not be spoken upon enough, but just know that there is always someone watching, always someone close to the end, and your words, your actions, literally may be the difference to where the story goes. So to me, that is the essence of the Menninger Clinic and what we do for people who need us, and we need to continue to do that. And so I remain honored, humbled, and proud to lead this organization. And I'm going to introduce Daryl Shorter now, who is a very, very special person to the Menninger Clinic and to me, and he's going to share where we're going with addictions and recovery.
Thank you, Armando. My name is Dr. Daryl Shorter, and I'm the Medical Director of Addiction Services at the Menninger Clinic. When I began working with persons with substance use disorders nearly 2 decades ago, I witnessed firsthand the hope and transformation that is possible when someone establishes a life in recovery. I heard stories like that of Ryan Leaf and countless others who found a bountiful new life and an ongoing process of growth, self-change, and reclaiming of the self. However, I quickly came to understand that working in the addictions field is not always about helping someone to get sober, and there is much work that still needs to be done. We must work to eradicate the stigma that persons who use drugs experience, the very stigma that prevents so many from seeking care. We must work to ensure that evidence-based treatments are offered to all persons living with substance use disorders, and to research novel approaches that will improve outcomes for patients, families, and communities. We must work to educate the next generation of addictions treatment providers, counselors, community health workers, and peer specialists so that we can continue to improve the quality of care given to those with substance use disorders. This work and more is realized through our new Center for Addiction Medicine and Recovery, where we can bring this vision to life together. At Menninger, we do not believe that one size fits all, especially when it comes to mental health care. Each patient is different, and therefore their treatment and their paths to recovery should also be different. We want to give people the support they need when and where they need it. That can mean providing support through inpatient services at the clinic, through our recently launched intensive outpatient program, or our Navigator program. We've even acquired an outpatient clinic in Dallas to support the continued recovery of our patients in that area. In order to make Menninger care the most effective and accessible it can be, we sometimes have to remove barriers to that care. Visiting our campus isn't always an option for everyone, so we are actively expanding our reach to communities in need throughout the city of Houston. Our addiction programming now includes a partnership with community clinics like El Centro de Corazon, where 90% of patients are Spanish-speaking and no specialty addiction services are immediately available. One community's greatest need may be assistance with smoking cessation. Another may need to focus on alcohol or cannabis use. But from within this model, the community is empowered to tell us how we can help them. And we use our knowledge and expertise to help support them in reaching their goals. At Menninger, we are trying to think outside of the box and find ways to innovate treatment. Recently, one of our researchers, Dr. Tech O, received an NIH grant to study the effects of transcranial magnetic stimulation, also known as TMS, on patients with opioid use disorder. We already know how effective treatments like TMS can be for depression and other disorders, and the ability to study its impact in substance use disorders is a game changer. Addiction psychiatrist Dr. Kelly Trong, also a graduate of the Baylor Addiction Psychiatry Fellowship Program, is currently running the first inpatient medication clinical trial at Menninger in decades. We know that both insomnia and cravings are major risk factors for persons who are trying to establish abstinence from alcohol. She's investigating a new medication that would target both of these and has added a virtual reality component that allows us to safely test how well the medication is working. Each of your gifts today are specifically going to support the Center for Addiction Medicine and Recovery that will be opening within the year. Your gift will directly support the clinical care provided to patients on our campus. It will support the work of research investigators like Drs. O and Trong. It will provide a space for collaboration of our clinicians and the community, serve as a site for recovery support meetings, and so much more. So, thank you. Thank you to each and every one of you for helping make this vision a reality. Now, I'd like to introduce our 2023 Vital Balance Award recipient, Archway Academy. Each year, the Vital Balance Award is presented to individuals and organizations who are breaking through barriers to make a difference for people affected by mental illness. Archway Academy is a recovery high school in the heart of Houston. They provide a structured place for teens to continue both their recovery and education without compromising either. They are the largest recovery school in the country and currently mentor new recovery schools. Since 2009, they have served over 1,666 students and have awarded more than 900 scholarships. 99% of Archway graduates go on to college, vocational schools, or the military. It is my honor to serve on Archway Academy's board of directors and to present them today with the Vital Balance Award. Please welcome Sasha Coles, Executive Director of Archway Academy, to the stage.
Hello, everyone. I'm so honored to be here. Thank you to Menninger for acknowledging the incredible work that Archway Academy is doing. I've had the honor of being the executive director for Archway for 15 years. My son was 10 months old when I started working at Archway, and now he is a 15-year-old freshman at Bel Air High School, so I'm very overwhelmed. I'm doing teenagers all day at work, and then I'm going home to love teenagers at home. There were a group of mental health professionals and really overwhelmed, frustrated, terrified parents in 2003 that came together to create the vision for Archway. One of those incredible visionaries is actually in this room, Dr. Annette Edens. I just want to say thank you to you. That group of committed parents and mental health professionals came up with the idea of a recovery high school. There were a handful of recovery high schools across the country at the time, mostly up north. And they brought that vision down to Houston, with the idea being we could stabilize kids in Houston. We could get them some acute care services, but then we return them back to their homes with very little support. And families who continued to struggle felt like the only option they had was to send their kids to therapeutic boarding schools, send their kids far away. And how devastating to think as a parent that the only way to keep your kid alive or to keep your kid safe was to send them away from their own family. So Archway became one of Houston's solutions to keeping Houston families in Houston, keeping kids local, keeping kids connected to their families, their grandparents, their local resources, their coaches, all these people who have loved and supported them for years, who were cheerleading them. They needed to remain in their community, but the community was struggling to serve them in a way that was meaningful. So I'm grateful that Archway has been kind of a staple of Houston recovery for, the last almost 20 years now. We have sober prom tomorrow night, so if y'all could send us some extra good vibes, we really would need them. I have not stayed up past midnight in a year since last year's sober prom. These are little monumental, important milestones that our young people deserve, but to have it done in a way where they still feel like their recovery and their mental health is a high priority. I know many of you have colleagues, family members, neighbors, friends who are raising teens right now. If you'll take a moment today to send them a text, give them a hug, remind them that they're doing great, and then remind them that there are programs like Archway Academy and the Menninger Clinic that are here to support them when it gets a little too hard and a little too overwhelming. So I just want to say thank you again for the honor of being acknowledged today. Have a wonderful time here today.
Well, it's certainly hard to follow that, but I will try. Again, my name is Stephen Davidon. I'm Editor-in-Chief of Culture Map Houston. And again, Professionally, I've had the pleasure of covering the Menninger Luncheon for several years, but personally, it was Ryan Leaf who inspired me from far away to share my story. He doesn't know this, but I told him recently. I was a Menninger patient in 2009. I was in my early 30s. I was in media. I was on the cover of a magazine that became sort of infamous in Houston. Life was great. I had just gotten married to my high school sweetheart in a storybook wedding. I contracted a virus that incubated in my heart. I had to quit my job, move into the second floor of our 3-story townhouse because I couldn't breathe. They told me I had a few years to live. I became extremely depressed. I shut down, and I lost the ability to work. I lost the ability to write, perform, speak, pretty much do anything. I was catatonic. And my wife at the time, a corporate attorney who cared passionately for me but didn't know what to do, just started Googling. And she found a place called the Menninger Clinic. It was highly rated, and being an astute researcher, she sent it over to my mom, Sona, who is here today. My mom is one of the most prodigious executives to ever work at JP Morgan Chase, Texas, and so she did her due diligence, and they sent me to the Menninger Clinic, much against my wishes. I grew up playing sports. I used to call depression a crutch, and how the world, universe, and God humbled me. I was introduced to a group that has a different name now, but it was a group of professionals who had like backgrounds. And the joke was, these were captains of industry, finance, sports, celebrities. I mean, it's kind of like Fight Club. We don't say who it is or what happened, but when I got there and I saw my colleagues, I said, should I be parking their cars? What am I doing here, serving them coffee? And Menninger introduced a thing called the milieu, which we sought treatment and assistance through the other patients. And I, being a smart aleck and a know-it-all, said, well, then what do we need you for? What is my mom paying for? And, well, boy, did they show me. And they introduced a lot to me. I had been chasing the guy in the mirror my whole life. I hated him. So I put on a persona with swagger and alcohol and daredevil antics. And it was a therapist at Menninger who taught me that childhood asthmatics who are in the emergency room a lot, gasping for life, have a decreased level of fear of death, which suddenly explained all the daredevil, crazy things I used to do that, Mom, you still don't know about and you didn't hear. Sorry about the car. I understood addiction and why alcohol was more than a need or an assistance. It was my life, and I was functional. I was first taught at Menninger what shame is versus guilt, and what all of this was doing, even though it wasn't technically my fault, what it was doing to others. And I've been so inspired by Ryan Leaf because his accountability and his ability to triumph taught me a lot. I went from unemployed, divorced, losing my father. The last thing I said to my father was, you weren't there when I needed you, don't try to be a dad now. And he died a few days later. I carried that around, I hated myself, and I went from my mom's kitchen table to a writer and producer at NFL Game Day Morning at the NFL Network. And, sorry, excuse me, this is not about me. So when they told me Ryan Leaf was coming, I've had 5 high school friends play professional football in my graduating class. I always wondered why I couldn't get on the field on the B team. Then I was playing them in Madden, and I'm like, you signed a $20 million contract, you still owe me $25, punk. I have grown up, most of us in Texas, I tell people all the time, if you grow up in LA, you will know a working actor. If you grow up in Texas, Friday Night Lights, you will know a professional athlete. Pro football is near and dear to me. I have many friends who are benefiting from the NFL's trust. Ryan Leaf has been a faraway mentor for me and an inspiration, and to go from Menninger to LA, NFL Network, back to Houston, and to be able to introduce this man is amazing. Most of you know Ryan Leaf from his victories. He led his high school to a state championship. He was the first man to lead the Washington State Cougars to a Pac-10 championship. He's the first Montanan to ever be a Heisman Trophy candidate. He's also the first Montanan to ever be drafted in the NFL's first round. When he signed with the San Diego Chargers in 1998 as the number 2 overall draft pick, he received the largest rookie bonus ever. He was the golden boy. He was a rock star. I followed his career. It was he or some guy named Peyton Manning? I don't watch sports. But life, as I found out, and the rest of us find out, sometimes has different plans. Ryan, you've had a lot of labels thrown at you. I cringe when my fellow colleagues, I went to NFL Network, CNN, and people would call you a bust. I see a father, I see a husband, and with all due respect to those people who call you bust, the term champion is someone who overcomes and advocates for others. You, sir, are a champion. It is my great honor, privilege to introduce Ryan Leaf, ladies and gentlemen.
Hi.
Is this thing on? All right.
Oh, yeah.
Ryan, I want to let you know that I'm auditioning for some parts, and I was only crying because, they're going to see my reel later, so
I love it.
that. Thank you.
I love it.
Ryan, for those of you, by the way, who haven't had a chance, do check out this really informative podcast about Ryan Leaf's life. In America, the intersection of sports and culture are hand in hand, and Ryan's story is inspiring. Ryan, you talk a lot about high school. You talked about college, but I'm wondering about the little boy in Great Falls, Montana, which, by the way, is an idyllic place. And if we have time, I want to get to your personal connection to Yellowstone. Did you always have the burden of being the guy, even at a young age?
Yeah, I kind of use I'm not a big product of your environment guy.
Yeah.
I had an amazing family. My mom and dad. My dad's a 2-tour Vietnam veteran who came home, got spit on, was told all those things, and he raised 3 boys, built a business, took care of my mom and our family. He's my hero. And I think for a lot of parents in here who have ever had to deal with anything around mental illness and substance abuse, you do the best you can. And the choices that we make as children are not representative, because I was taught well. But I was placed on a pedestal pretty early because of how good I was at playing sports. And consequences weren't necessarily the same for me if I have behaviorally. And you brought up the point around shame and guilt. Early on, I was, because I was just different, I was told I was bad, the way I performed. Like, my heroes weren't what the very conservative Montana establishment wanted. My heroes were the Fab Five from Michigan, right? Wearing your shorts down to your knees, your black socks. I had my head shaved, I had an earring. They wanted a great athlete, and instead they got me. And so I found out pretty early that since they didn't approve, that meant I was a bad person in the way they treated me. And so my only way or recourse to win was to compete at everything and win. And kind of take that. I played with a lot of rage. And it was my goal to get out of that small town, become a professional athlete, and then rub it in their faces.
Speaking of that, we talked about this briefly earlier. You did have the rage. You were square peg, whatever you want to call it, in Great Falls, Montana. I do wonder, though, and I've talked about this to several people, including my brother. He said that you're if you all don't know, Josh Allen, he's a superstar quarterback for the Buffalo Bills. He is a tall, strapping, 6'5", mobile quarterback with a strong cannon arm, sort of like this gentleman here. I wonder if you were born 20 years too early. Social media would have potentially changed your life, and also people would have maybe understood your swagger and your demonstrative nature and the it appeal that you had. Football was a very conservative and different time in the 90s, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it was. You know, there were some great athletes that came before me that weren't like that, though. You know, but they also didn't make it out of the state of Montana either. So there was a real fine line that I walked, kind of between, you know, elite athlete and asshole, and I just kind of bounced back and forth until I firmly got
Sometimes channel both in the same
entrenched
time,
in
yeah.
the asshole
Yeah.
part of it. But yeah, I mean, my high school basketball coach, who I love, who was one of my really first mentors, he told me that years later. He said, "I think you just were incredibly ahead of your time."
Yeah.
But I mean, those are things you can't control. I did what I thought was best, that protected me from other people's arrows, to try to do what I loved to do, and that was compete and play ball. I loved it so much, no matter what it was. It was football, basketball, or baseball. I played all three of them in college, and it was just something I loved to do, and I loved that I got to enjoy it with my father. He never put it on me at all, ever. He just enjoyed, you know, getting to experience his son, I think, excel at something that he really loved. He loved sports, and all the life experience that he had now to kind of be in this place. I think that's where I was trying to ultimately achieve for him to be proud of me, and that's what I looked for a lot of.
Ryan, in studying and learning about your very compelling origin story, which has become sort of the term du jour these days, I was shocked because I remember the Sports Illustrated cover where you were like total rock star. I remember what, you know, Peyton Manning was, respectfully to Mr. Manning, it looked like a track star or maybe a soccer player. You looked like a hulking, potentially linebacker, let alone you were a quarterback. And so one would assume, again, having grown up in Texas and Friday Night Lights, that you were the big man on campus, Mr. Popular, and super confident alpha male, and you have a great story about just being sort of shy and not that popular. I was literally shocked when I heard that.
I was quite different when I was on the basketball court or the football field. There was a different persona. I was an extreme extrovert. But I tell people all the time I was a drug addict long before I ever took a drug, and how I behaved. There was a kind of a polarizing way you behave like that. I was a egomaniac with a self-esteem problem. And that stemmed from being shamed and not thinking I was good enough. And I never felt like I necessarily could be who I truly was. My mom was always so worried about what other people would think of me and judge me. She was a child of an alcoholic. And so she saw those traits in me. And instead of, tending to them, she shamed me. And so that I carried with me. So yeah, I didn't use drugs, I didn't drink. I looked at those who did that in high school as morally bankrupt type of people. I would show up at parties when I was in high school with a six-pack of 7-Up, yeah, and just thought I was better than everybody else, and I was going to show them. And so yeah.
You said they'd be parking your cars one day.
Yeah, probably something like that.
Yeah.
Something silly, pumping my gas.
Yeah, pumping your gas, yeah.
Things like that. Didn't date anybody from my high school. The girl I dated was 90 miles away. I even got asked that question at our senior night graduation. This lovely young woman who I'd been friends with asked me that question, like, why did you never date anybody from our high school? And I think my response to her was, because I'm better than all of you. And it was a complete defense mechanism for me to protect myself and not trust. And it's how I got through everything. And I was successful with doing it. And we always do whatever we can, whether that's a negative and toxic way of dealing with things, if you're successful. But what happens when you fail, and you fail at the biggest possible level? you don't have the coping mechanisms. And I also think my development was arrested probably around when I was 13 years old, because I was, I had this golden arm or this jump shot, and that pedestal kept rising and rising. I don't think I ever truly had to address any sort of life skills on how to deal with life on life's terms. And I think that happens a lot around our country, around the institution of sports in our cultures. I played here in Texas. I coached here in Texas. The Friday Night Lights book I read when I was in high school, I mean, it's bigger than life. And nowadays, some of these young kids are being placed on that pedestal incredibly early. Guys are being awarded scholarships when they're 13, 14 years old from coaches, and it's just, it can get so out of hand if you're not properly prepared to deal with life on life's terms.
Ryan, excellent segue, because I wanted to talk to you about that. The pro sports, I worked in pro sports and I work in big media, and they do create a machine that can lift you up or destroy you. And what people often forget, and I talked about this too, there's a fan mentality of, hey, I've heard fans say this, I bought a ticket, I can do what I want, and I can say what I want. And then I've been in newsrooms and press boxes where guys are really harsh with someone like yourself, which other journalists may say, that's really rough. And first of all, they consider you soft as the journalist if we go easy on you, so to speak. And secondly, they say, well, they signed up for it. But you don't sign up for ridicule. You don't sign up for mocking. And also, I think it's easy to forget that the trajectory of a professional athlete, oftentimes, you and I talked about this, starts at maybe 12 and ends at 23, 24, 25, 26. Yeah. Can you talk to me about the pressure of making life decisions as a multimillionaire, grand prize, golden boy, great white hope at 22?
Well, I thought it was what it was supposed to be. I expected to be there. I expected this to be the case. What I didn't fully understand is what came with it. I was this redneck kid from Montana who all he wanted to do was play ball and be liked. And instead of saying that, I was kind of characterized as, versus Peyton, kind of the black hat. Yep. And I didn't correct anybody. I've never been able to correct anybody. I didn't like confrontation unless I was the one that was just trying to intimidate. So I just never corrected anybody, and I thought, okay, this is what people want. It's always kind of worked for me. Let's go with it. And so in the darkest of moments, whether it was a reporter who was telling a story, a negative story about me, or a fan yelling at me, or anything like that, I had no way to deal with that in a healthy, positive way. So my way was to battle. I'd always figured out a way to show up on Sunday or Saturday and win and play well. And now I was at the very highest level where you're up against the best athletes in the world. The 1% of the 1%. And when your central nervous system is on tilt all week long, preparing to do that, you can't battle your teammates, the media, family, people who are trying to hold you accountable and help you, and then go out and perform at a high level. And so when I didn't, and when you don't, you are dropped from that arena really quickly. And if you don't have the coping mechanisms to deal with it in a healthy, positive way, it's over in a hurry, because there are hundreds, thousands who are right behind you wanting to take your job. And so you're not long for that if you can't deal with it in the right way.
Speaking of deal with it, you have masterfully dealt with this. You and I talked about this. The Jim Rome Show at the time was the biggest sports radio show in the country. It started a trend of sort of smack talking and shaming. And your worst, we've all had a horrible day, we've all had our bad days at the office. We've all had a bad day where we say things we wish and do things we wish we hadn't. But your bad day at the office became a soundbite in the Jim Rome Show. It became a YouTube thing. If the GIFs were present back then, it would have been a GIF. You yelled and at a physical situation with a reporter, and you became branded with it. And again, it sparked it, but can you talk to us about how you dealt with that?
Poorly? not only the situation, but the after effect. My dad was down there when I yelled at this reporter. He brought some of his work colleagues down because his son was an NFL quarterback, and they were about to play the Giants. And I played my worst football game of my life the week before, and I erupted at a reporter, and it became this huge story. I'll date myself here. The internet had just started, so it's one of the first viral videos, right? And it was a caricature of me. My dad helped me. This is the best way to put it. My career ended not because of how I played, but because of how I dealt with it. That day, 3 games in, I was 2-1 as a starter. I would go on and play for 5 years, but my career was over that day because of how I dealt with it. Like, life isn't fair for anybody, whether you're a starting NFL quarterback or anybody else. It is entirely about how you deal with the situation. That is the only thing and it's the simplest way to look at it too. And because of how that domino fell that day and how I dealt with it from that point moving forward. 2 days later, my dad helped me write an apology. I didn't want to apologize. I thought the guy was in the wrong. There's a video of me reading the apology. I looked like this petulant child, which I was. You know, imagine giving a 13-year-old $31 million. That's who I was. It's not going to go well. And I just kind of flippantly throw the apology letter into my locker. It just looks, the optics are incredibly bad. And then I battle. I battle the media. I battle my teammates. I don't play well. And from that point on, I don't remember a positive thing again for me in the NFL. So this is really a story about how I dealt with it. Like, I was still talented enough to perform, but you have to have everything. There's a reason why there's only maybe 12 guys a year that are good to great NFL quarterbacks in the world. It's how you deal with failure over and over and over again at that level. And I just saw failure as an absolute black and white issue. Either you're a success or you're a failure. I was like the first Ricky Bobby running around out there.
You're the first or last.
And that's the way I viewed it. It was. And so it's an easy way now to look back on it now when I'm working with former NFL players or people who are dealing with mental health or substance abuse issues. Like, I don't care what the circumstances are or what led to it. I want you to be able to address them. But I also want you to understand, like, life sucks for a lot of us, no matter what. How do you deal with it? How does a woman who lives on the street end up going to Harvard, right? That's the product of your environment aspect of things. Like, you have a choice when you wake up in the morning. My wife has a real problem with this because when I wake up, I'm just like really grateful for my bed and in the life that I have now. And she's just grumbly at me, and I'm like, you can choose to be happy this morning. Her immediate response to me is always, not until I get my coffee. And I respect that. But it is, you have control. You control what you can control. And at that moment, the things that I had control over, I failed at miserably, assuming I could control everybody else.
I wanted to talk about, and by the way, as a newlywed, I totally relate to all that. And first thing I do is make my wife coffee. You hopped around a couple of teams in the league, including the Dallas Cowboys. You ended up coaching in Texas, but things got really dark, including addiction, incarceration. How have you come to grips with that? And I wonder if shame as a young man, as a child, shame as a teenager, covering that shame. You mentioned in your podcast about, sort of wondering if people were making fun of you, and then being publicly heckled the way they were mercilessly. You don't believe in excuses, but everything in life has context. Can you talk to me about how a Ryan Leaf ends up as the Chargers, next big thing, to in a prison cell attempting suicide? And do you see correlations between what happened and what you were hiding from to now? To then, I should say.
My last stop was with the Seattle Seahawks, and I think I was just so tired of being beat up physically, emotionally, I was starting to develop the real mental health issues that I didn't know I had, and I was sad all the time. I couldn't get out of bed, felt really lazy. I'd gained a bunch of weight, and so instead of walking into my head coach's office and telling him all those things, I just quit the thing I wanted to do since I was 4 years old, and I thought I could just disappear, right? I had what I thought was success. I had this money, I had this power that came with that money, and the prestige of being an NFL quarterback was what every one of my peers had ever wanted. The prestige had a bit of tarnish now, but I still didn't think that was that big a deal. So what I didn't fully understand is when I walked away that I could just have a normal life. When you're drafted alongside arguably the greatest to play the game in Peyton Manning, my name doesn't go away. We just went through a whole month of April where I just got shit on. And I do every single year. It's not going to go away. So if my name wasn't going to go away and I had never found a way to deal with it in the proper way, there was no way I was going to get better. It just wasn't. I was taking too much of it on. And I felt beat over the head by it all the time, and I didn't know you could go seeking therapy or anything like that. That was weakness. Growing up in the cowboy culture of Montana and locker rooms my whole life, I'd never seen another man actually stand in front of me and go, "I'm really struggling here. Can somebody help me?" And so if you've never seen it, how are you supposed to do it? Like, I was as miserable as you can imagine. And then the final domino flipped. I was in Vegas for a fight because I'm still a narcissist like that. Like, I walk into a room like this and I think, like, don't recognize me, please don't recognize me. And then, like, 10 minutes later, I'm like, why the hell isn't anybody recognizing me? And so
Can I get your autograph?
we're at a fight,
Selfie.
and they're announcing celebrities in the audience. And it's Michael Jordan, and it's Charles Barkley, and Dr. Dre, and the whole MGM Grand's applauding and applauding and applauding. And I know what's coming. And they announce my name. And the whole MGM Grand just boos and hisses. And it's not like it hadn't happened before. You walk into an opposing team stadium, you're the quarterback, they boo you, but you're wearing this armor, you have the helmet on, the shoulder pads, you feel like a bit of a warrior, and it almost emboldens you. Instead, my addict mind at the time heard, not only are you a terrible football player, but you are an awful human being. And so that night, when I was going to these parties where there were Super Bowl champs and there was Hall of Famers, where I always felt less than and judged, fear, an acquaintance of mine offered me some Vicodin. Now, I've been introduced to this drug my whole life. I've had 15 surgeries because of playing this game. This would be the first time that I would take it for the emotional issues I was going through. And it worked. It had always worked for me for my physical pain. It's supposed to. There's a reason why it was invented. It is, if used properly. But I would use it for my emotional pain that night, and it did exactly what it had always done for me. It took away the pain. I didn't feel better. I didn't feel the judgment. I didn't feel the fear. I didn't feel the less than. I didn't feel anything. And I think that's just had what I've been searching for I think my whole life, just not to feel anything. And so that started an 8-year run of just trying to replicate that feeling. And then that was my sole purpose. Like, opioids became everything to me. So I wouldn't feel anything. Like, I was Gollum, right? It was my precious. And it was like everything else, it didn't matter. Dates with beautiful women, opportunities to make more money and around my celebrity. I was not going to waste that on anybody else. It was mine. It was my opportunity and it isolates you, and it does all that. And that's what 8 years looked like. So much so where I went back to college to finish my degree, got a coaching job down here in West Texas, but was in just a horrible position to be teaching kids, to be doing anything really as a human being. So much so that I victimized the communities here in Texas, the kids I coached, family, friends, everything. I absolutely destroyed other people's lives for my addiction. Until finally, at the very end, where I'm back home and I'm supposed to be the hero, instead I'm just this, this, I don't know what the best word was for it, monster. Having blown every dollar that I'd ever made on drugs and making myself seem more important. Living in a little apartment back by the alley, waking up every morning, looking in the mirror, wondering if I had pills, and if I didn't, how do I get them? And luckily for me, I'm not a master criminal. I'm 6'7", 300 pounds at the time, so sneaking in and out of people's homes. Wasn't a cat burglar. Luckily, I got found out pretty quick. And there were all those nights that I clambered into the mirror, because I knew who I was, right? I knew I was this junkie, drug fiend. There was no misunderstanding that. I saw who I saw in the mirror. I couldn't tell anybody, because that fear of continuous shame just continued, because I thought it was the worst thing in the world to be this failed football player, this addict, this criminal, and no one could know about it. And so all those nights that I clamored for help, just to the universe, not to anybody in particular, finally my higher power, and whatever that is, showed up in the form of the sheriff's department. And they arrested me, and I would spend 32 months in prison because of it. But this would also put to the test of the idea that I was a drug addict long before I ever took a drug, because it was taken away from me.
And you have, in your trademark sense of humor and grace and ability to completely redirect the narrative of your life. You made a great joke on air on ESPN 97.5 with John and Lance about how your warden has become your best referral.
He's like my agent now. Literally, I just spoke at the last week in Columbus at the National Wardens Convention for the Department of Justice.
Which is a thing, apparently. Yeah, which is a thing.
For the Department of Justice.
Yeah.
He was actually receiving the National Warden of the Year award. And you just never know. You never know who your best referral is going to be. And you don't never know who you're talking to in an event or something like that years later, they may end up have been one of your biggest supporters and biggest spokesperson because of how that first impression was. And so I don't know where he got, my first impression with him, I treated the guards and the wardens in prison like the worst of anybody. I was horrible. I didn't do anything to better myself while I was in there. Anything. I remember at my sentencing, I told the judge, "What are you doing? This is supposed to be a 20-year sentence. You're only giving me 7. I was masochistic. I thought I was doing everybody a favor. Just throw me away, throw away the key. Won't be victimizing my community. Won't be victimizing my family. Anybody. Just, I wanted to be dead. Is what I wanted." And so there I was, and this dude just never gave up on me. He kept coming down and asking me, school kids from classes around the community would come in, probably more kind of like a scared straight or maybe an education around prisons and things like that. And he'd ask me to go speak to these kids, and I would always look at them and just, beat it, And so I can't tell you why one day he asked me, and I must have been in a good enough headspace where I went and did it. I don't remember what I said. I'm sure it wasn't very articulate or very good, but the dude just never gave up on me. And there's a ton of those people that just never gave up on me. And I don't know why. I don't know why. And so, like I said, he's gotten me 4 speaking engagements around the country. Dude's better than my agent. I always say, my warden at my prisons has gotten me more work than you have.
He's the next Ari Gold.
Do your job,
He's
bro.
the next one, yeah. Do your job. Be better.
Yeah.
Right. Go ahead. Sorry, Brent.
You brought up the point around I like when there's adults in the room, because when I go speak to kids and when I go speak to college kids, it's a serious subject, but they don't understand the self-deprecation and the humor, and I love it when you guys laugh because, I'm funny.
You'll be here all week.
My brother is a comedian and he writes and he's an actor, and so everybody thinks he's the funniest, leaf in the family, and I have to, I have to correct everybody at all the family functions, like, I'm the funny one. And so, the day I got out, I had nothing, okay? And I think this is really important for everybody in this room to understand, and why the Menninger Clinic and others that do the same type of work, how important they are. I had nothing, okay? I had no money. The one thing I did have is I had a place where I could lay my head. My mom and dad, who have unconditionally loved me my whole life, they did not need a famous football playing son, ever. They were there to pick me up. So I had a place to lay my head down, no money, credit score was 500, no prospects, no jobs, no girls weren't lined up around the block to date me.
But you're funny.
We had to figure that one out.
Right.
I work for the Disney Corporation now, if you can believe that. And like Mickey Mouse wasn't waiting outside the doors going, "Hey Ryan, come work for me." There was nothing. I go home the next morning, my hometown newspaper, cartoon in there, Ryan Leaf just got out, lock up your medicine cabinets. And that moment I thought, okay, this is what it was going to be like forever. There's no hope. And I got that reprieve when I was accepted into a treatment facility. Now, the trust didn't exist at the time. It was just starting out. And the NFLPA, for being my union, was horrible. I went to them and asked for help to pay for my treatment because I needed to go. I needed to go to treatment. And I remember this dude, his name was Tyrone Allen, and I can remember this, so we were on speakerphone with my parents. My parents were he's going to go get treatment. He wants to go get treatment. He wants to do it. And he says to me, "We're not going to throw good money after bad." And there's just these moments that just get chopped down. Your legs get chopped down. And how do you just keep getting back up? Well, there's a nonprofit called the Player Care Foundation that was outside the purview of pretty much anything NFL. And there was this young man there who just started named Andrew Joe. And I remember when he called us and I applied for the grant, and he told me that they were awarding me the grant so I could go to treatment. If he doesn't do that, I don't get the treatment I need. I doubt it 100% that I'm here telling you that story. And that's where it all started. And we've talked a lot about the past, and I think we'd be remiss before we get out of here that it's about what the Menninger Clinic does. It's about what treatment facilities do to give individuals the opportunity, to give individuals the hope, to give someone the opportunity to write a letter to Armando like that when he leaves the facility. I just needed somebody to believe in me. And I've been carried these last 11 years. I think a lot of people see the Instagram life and everything that goes on, and they assume everything's better, everything's okay. When I got to treatment, I finally was diagnosed with what I was dealing with, and it was a mental health disorder. I have not found yet somebody who deals with a substance abuse problem that doesn't have a co-occurring mental health disorder. That is the foundation of it. The substance abuse is the symptom. It's how I coped with it. And for the longest time, I thought I was doing the wrong thing the right way. And so when I found out why, because of a lot of us in our generation, we have to understand why. Why am I like this? Why am I like this? Why do I do this? And they're able to give you some answers. And then you can go about the business of doing that. And one of those biggest things is to find surrender and acceptance. And the only reason I'm funny about it, or I can joke about it, because it's a serious subject, is because I just don't take myself very seriously. I'm not the most important person in the room. In fact, when I walked out of that prison cell, from that point on, it could never be about me again. It had to be about other people. And what's ironic about that is that when you make it about other people, your life gets better. And I always thought for my life to get better, it had to be about me. So it's entirely grained in service. So, didn't happen overnight. My therapist and I worked on an affirmation that I started about, seven and a half years ago, where I say it in the mirror every single morning. What other people think of me is none of my business. It sounds simple, but my brain believed any of the outside noise. It believed it. When somebody said you were a bust, you were a piece of shit, whatever, that was more truthful to me than somebody saying,
You're good.
You're amazing. Yeah. In fact, when somebody says, thank you, you're an inspiration, my tendency is my head goes to my feet. And when somebody says something negative, I'm like, yeah, that's about right. You're ingrained with it. So I started doing that about 7 years ago, and I have not missed a morning of it. And there came a point when, I know the brain's not a muscle, but it's the strongest thing in your body. And if you train it, like you train anything else, it takes over. And when I say it in the mirror this morning, it just flows off my tongue. I believe it. So I'm okay with who I am. I'm this flawed human being, like everybody else, who just is trying to be better every day, and I found a purpose. I would have never had the purpose that I have now if I had won a couple Super Bowls and rode off into the sunset. Never. I would never be relatable. I just wouldn't. I can't relate with Tom Brady, and we're pretty darn close. We both play professional football. I mean, I'm about as close as anybody else in this room, and I still can't relate to that dude. Like, he's perfect. I'm just like, what? But when I walk into a room and people go, oh, yeah, that dude screws up all the time, we're like each other, That's the truth.
Right.
This is a story about, this is a story of how to fail. That's what this story is. It's not a redemptive story. It is what it is. It's just a story of how to fail.
I want to read everyone a text that sums up your sense of humor and your mastery of how you've redefined the narrative of your life. Jets fans, gross. New York Jets fans were going at you, trolling you, and the new Ryan Leaf, who, the old one maybe would have reacted, you reacted this way. I've had a better life than Jets fans the last decade, and I spent 3 years of those in prison. Respectfully, of course. Ryan, my last question to you is... That's true. I mean, there was a 4'8" lady from Houston, a superstar gymnast named Simone Biles, who sparked a narrative on mental health for athletes in Tokyo. Yeah. And she took a lot on those little shoulders of hers, very strong shoulders, but little. And they say that great change happens when good men do good things. I know you don't preach, but are you encouraging other superstars, celebrities, people of influence and power to share their stories? Do you think that's important, and why?
Well, we heard Dr. Shorter talk about this. It's the stigma. What the stigma does, it disallows anyone to actually show up and say the things that I wanted to say to the coach in Seattle. Like, I was going through all those things. Because we haven't seen it. And what we have seen over the last few years, we've seen individuals such as Kevin Love, Michael Phelps, The Rock, who's the most famous actor on the planet, talk about his struggles with mental illness. And then you had Simone Biles in the biggest moment of her life in the world for the Olympics. To do the right thing for her. Are you kidding me? You don't think she wanted to be out there and competing and doing what she always wanted to do and be successful? And I think there's a lot of people that stood up and applauded that. But I want to point this out to everybody, too. It was probably 75% of just negative and toxic venom to the 25% that existed. And that's what the stigma is. And so opportunities like this for you all to show up, that's removing the stigma, okay? saying that this is okay. This is normal. And in a world that we're quite divided in right now, the fact that you all showed up today, I always talk about this, where you have a choice. You have a choice to deal with things in a positive and healthy way or a negative and toxic one. So this morning, or whenever you decided to buy one of these seats to show up, that was a choice. Others didn't. And you've all been part of the solution today. And I don't know if there's anything more important in our day and age right now than to make it about other people. Every single life in this world is precious. No one is better or worse than the next. And it's hard. It just is. And so, if you can do what you've done today, tomorrow, you've done your part. And what's the hardest thing in a world where we quantify everything, and then stay out of the result. You did your part. You lay your head down tonight knowing you made a difference in somebody else's life. Whether that individual who comes to Menninger accepts the help and is willing to surrender at that moment, you have no say in that. You have zero control over that. What you do have control over, and what I had control over that day when I chose to yell at the reporter, was to do things in a healthy, positive way. And then let the chips fall as they may. You did your part. And before we get out of here, I have to acknowledge I get to do a lot of cool stuff now. And I stay busy a lot, and I'm back in the game, and I'm around broadcasts. I have my own TV show and things like that. But at the foundation, it has to be this. Otherwise, I don't get to have all of that. I wouldn't be the father I need to be. I wouldn't be the husband that I need to be if not. In the Menninger Clinic, I don't think Armando or anybody else, Stephanie or anybody else there fully understands what you've given me. Purpose. And that's the thing I needed when I walked out of those prison doors. I needed something purposeful in my life. And you've given me that. Because I get messages, I can't tell you how many during the pandemic. Tens of thousands of messages on my social media platforms of people either wanting to just tell me they're struggling or asking for help. And I was overwhelmed because I didn't have an outlet to say, here, I have this place. You can go. I have somebody you can talk to. I tried to do my best and answer as many as I could and be there. But what the Menninger Clinic has given me, somebody who's in recovery, long-term recovery, and still deals with his mental illness every single day, you've given me that purpose. And that's exactly what everybody in this room can do. If I told you, and this seems hyperbolic, but for you to donate money or for you to donate your time, you actually have a hand in saving someone's life. Where would you find that in any other possible situation? I mean, it sounds unbelievable or hyperbolic, like it's whatever. No, it is. This can't happen unless it's for you, so. So thank you, sir. This is by far the proudest thing that, outside of holding my boy, this is the proudest thing that I've ever done. The hardest thing in the world I ever did was get sober, and this is what pride feels like because of it. So thank you all very, very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, I give you wordsmith, comedian, father, husband, and champion, Ryan Leaf.
Sit down. Thanks, brother. Thanks.
You're awesome. I'm embarrassed to be on the stage after he left, but we just want to say thank you. Thank you for your support of the Menninger Clinic and all that it does. Thank you for being here today. Thank you, Ryan, and thank you to the sponsors. And don't forget to get your floral arrangement from Texas's favorite grocery store, H-E-B. And be safe and take care of everyone around you.